Before we begin the episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, Chin Up Goggles, the new generation of vision training. Its simplistic design eliminates downward vision, improving a player's spatial awareness, anticipation, skill acquisition and execution. The findings have been supported by scientific research in CIT, now MTU. Be sure to visit chinupgoggles.com for more. Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On episode 83, I'm delighted to be joined by one of the leading female coaches in GAA, Cliodhna O'Connor. Cliodhna has worked with All-Ireland champions Coola, the Dublin Senior Hurlers, currently with the Dublin Senior Ladies Footballers, and has also a new role with the Irish Senior Women's Hockey Team. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Cliodhna, so I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Hi Cliodhna, thanks a million for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks Orla, good to chat to you again.
Just a quick disclaimer for any of the listeners, Cliodhna was actually my coach for a number of years, so it's nice to be in this position now with me asking you the questions, Cliodhna.
Yeah, it's the other way around. Not me grilling you about what did you do at the weekend.
Exactly.
Did you do your rehab? Yeah.
Exactly. Before we get into everything, I do have a number of listeners not from a GA or LGFA background. Would you mind giving a quick intro to those who might not know who you are?
Okay. So my name's Cliodhna, based in Dublin in Ireland. I'm an athlete development coach. I started my own kind of sports career playing football. Kind of like loads of people in Ireland, played a bit of everything when you're younger, then got into football, played intercounty for Dublin. Since then retired, took up a variety of other sports to keep me busy, rowing being the main one. And then from a coaching career, I suppose doing a lot of GAA work, a lot of team sports, but working across a range of sports as well.
At what point in your playing career did you realise you wanted to get involved in coaching?
I suppose, Orla, I was coaching when I was about 14. Okay. You know, it's funny when people ask you about when did you start. Like I always think of summer camp. So I was always, as soon as I was old enough to coach, I was coaching. All my part-time jobs were coaching jobs. So that's what I did to earn a few bob on the side during the summers. So I think it's something that, unbeknownst to myself, I always was doing. I wasn't filling out my CAO form thinking I want to be a sports scientist or a coach. It kind of just happened. It was very unplanned. But when I reflect on it, I realize I was always doing it in some shape or form. So maybe it was always meant to be. I just didn't know it, you know. Okay,
interesting. And whether through your playing career or getting involved in coaching, maybe the initial stages, what coaches had the biggest impact on you?
There's a variety of ones, and different people show you different things. You learn different things. So there was certain coaches who were really good for my confidence. My very first goalkeeping coach, Colin Carney from Sylvester's, he was the first person who taught me how to play in goals. Peter Clark was our club manager, and he got Colin along. And to be honest, I had been just shoved in goals up to that point, and only because I could catch it over my head and I had a decent enough kick in terms of length, and they thought, right, grand, this will do.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And Colin really showed me the basics and really gave me confidence in terms of, I could be decent at this. So he was a perfect coach at that time for me to I suppose embed all the principles of goalkeeping and give me confidence, and a really nice fella, and kind of looked after me and all that sort of stuff. So really nice. And then you have other coaches in further on in your career who are more demanding, and as you get better, they challenge you in different ways, and some of them you don't really gel with on a personal level, but they're still teaching you something. So I think you learn something from everybody that coaches you, because everyone brings something different to the table.
Yeah, that's a great point. Out of interest, is it important for coaches to have playing experience? Whether it doesn't have to necessarily be the sport they're in, but do you think it's important that coaches have that experience of being the player and being on the other side of it?
I've thought about this a bit, and my answer is not necessarily, because I think it does help if you know the language of the sport. So for me, if I so technically as a sports science, you should be able to coach any sport. It's the same principles. You check the demands of the game and you align that to your coaching program or your whatever. But if you know, in terms of communication with the athlete, if you know the sport and you've played it and you know the nuances and you know the language, then you can communicate better, I feel, or it's easier to communicate. But do you necessarily have to have played? No, I think it helps. And I think if you haven't played, you need to do your research and you need to learn the language, and you need to be really clear about how you're communicating. So you probably have a bit more work to do in terms of making your coaching as efficient as possible if you haven't played that particular sport.
Okay, that makes sense. I just want to draw on your playing experience for a little bit, because there was a great story from Davy Burke about the Burger King. I sent you the link about the leadership and the culture of that team. As a coach now and reflecting on that team and, you know, in the teams you're involved in now, how do you create that elite high performance culture and develop leaders in that team to drive that culture?
I think there's a lot of talk about high performance culture and what it is, and sometimes I think people oversimplify it, and sometimes people think it's something that it absolutely isn't. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly what it is.
Okay.
So I think the biggest thing for me, and I say to players all the time, definitely in terms of team sports, my question is to them: do you make it easy for the people around you to be brilliant? So as a team sport player, do I pull out the best? Do I give people the opportunity to shine? Do I make it easy for them? So if somebody is doing something that isn't aligned to what the team desires, how do you? That's going to happen. So how do you engage with it? How do you do it? How do you deal with it? Do you chastise them in front of everybody? Is that best for them? Like where's the win here? Your job is to make them better. So sometimes just a quiet word and a bit of guidance, and especially new people into an environment. I listened to something recently, and they said the best cultures in the world, or the strongest cultures in the world, are really good at welcoming people. So they're so positive. Yes, we love to have you. We love to have new people to strengthen our culture. We're so welcoming, but within that welcome, we'll be very clear about what we expect within our group. So we'll show you the ropes. We'll spend time getting to know you, letting you get settled in. But then when you know what's expected, you better live up to it. You better play by the rules. Yeah. And I think that's important, because often new people come into an environment and they're not really looked after. It's like sink or swim. And that's not really fair, I think.
Mm-hmm. So as a coach then, how, obviously as a player it's different, but as a coach, how do you make new players feel welcome in your squad?
I think the personal connection is important, to try and simple things like make the effort to stay low, make the effort to chit chat. For me as a coach, there can be 101 things going on in your head before a session. Trying really basic stuff, trying to be prepared and clear in your mind about what you're doing. So the last 15, 20 minutes before the session, you're not rushing around trying to get things set up or draw out your diagrams. You're actually just talking to people. Checking in with, how did you find that? Was that difficult? Is there anything we can do to help you? Also, nudging other players, rather than always coming from me, nudging other players. Here, look, listen, Orla, I think she found that session tough there. Would you go over and have a chat with her and just see how she's doing? And so encouraging people to make those connections with each other, I think, is important.
Brilliant. You did mention it there, you're still trying to find the answer, but what do you think is high performance? What would be your definition?
That's a big question, Orla. You definitely put me on the spot there now. I don't know. I could rattle off something for you, but I don't have a clear definition in my head. I know it's, for me, one thing that I keep coming back to is specificity. So knowing exactly what you want to achieve and having a clear plan of how you want to do it. So rather than just saying, we want to win the championship, like, what are we actually doing? And am I clear about why so me as a coach, I'm trying to get X player fitter. There's probably 101 things I could do with that player. But so when I go to make my decisions, I have to be able to sit down with saying, okay, if I have 50 options, those 20 options, I'm putting them in the bin straight away, not appropriate. Why? Then, okay, now I'm down to 30. Now I'm drilled it down to 15. But I have to be able to justify and understand, why am I making the choices I'm making? So that the clarity, I think, is so important in high performance. And I definitely feel, and me included, sometimes things get muddy because we're trying to do too many things. There's so much data available in sports science, and you're like, God, what numbers am I supposed to be looking at? But sometimes it's actually really, really simple.
Brilliant.
And we tend to overcomplicate it. I know that's not a definition, and it's maybe a little bit waffly.
No, that's a great answer. No, that's a great answer. For you, Cliodhna, why do you coach? What do you get from it? What would you see as your purpose?
My purpose. Again, Orla, bloody big question there. What is your purpose?
I told you I'd be grilling you.
Yeah, I'm in the confessional box here. What is my purpose? I coach because I like doing it. I coach because I like the adrenaline. I like the pressure. I get great satisfaction when people perform. I don't really compete. I try and compete myself in different things, but I don't have a massive amount of time. So the next best thing is coaching someone and they're competing. Now you could challenge me, my vicariously living through the people I'm coaching maybe, but I get great satisfaction of seeing people perform really well, doing all the work, making the best plans, and then sort of let go of the reins, throw them out on the pitch or on the field or into the arena and seeing what happens. And kind of at that stage in my role, you're nearly crossing your fingers and going, okay, let's see what happens this Sunday. Yeah. You're trying to be as prepared as you can. So there is a great satisfaction in that. I love kind of the sporting endeavor, the value of sports. So seeing somebody who, it just gets to play and play better and try and improve. And it's just very satisfying for me.
And how do you think you've evolved? You mentioned there you started at 14, but since you've really taken coaching seriously, and maybe even after your playing career, how do you think you've evolved as a coach? What is the biggest, if I was to video a session now and kind of mic you up and compare that to, say, 10 years ago, what would be the biggest difference there?
I would say the biggest difference is, I think I'm probably quieter now, maybe. I think I'm more conscious of it not being about me. I think, as a player, being a goalkeeper, you're ordering people around, or being a captain.
You definitely were anyway, Cliodhna.
Yeah. Won't be git. Midfielders, why aren't you running? Because we're wrecked and you keep kicking the ball 40 meters away from us. But I think understanding. So as a coach, sometimes when I started, you sort of felt like you had to be in the middle of everything, organizing, and it was a good session because there was 100 cones and I was in the middle and I had complete control over the group and all of that stuff. And I think as the teams get better and as I've developed as a coach, I think trying to take a step back and giving more ownership to the players and less of me and more of the players, I think trying to draw more out of them. That I think that's, but also knowing when you need to step in, because you can't just, I also made the mistake of, here's a good example. I was coaching a boys minor under 21 team or something in the club. And I was on the sideline and I was saying, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. We've done our training, out you go, play the game. And I thought this is great. They've got to make their own decisions on the pitch, etc., etc. So here's me thinking about my coaching handbook. This is player-centered coaching. It's wonderful. They were incredibly frustrated. We're not getting any direction from the line. This is not my job. You're the one playing the game, but we don't know what we're doing. So they were used to getting a lot of direction from their previous coaches, dictating a lot of stuff. And it's because they were only just coming out of underage, and I was acting as if they knew exactly what they're doing. But the reality is that was too big of a jump. So I had to say, all right, in this scenario, yes, it would be great if they could make all their decisions themselves and they knew exactly what they were doing and I didn't have to do anything. But in this scenario, they need more support from me. So I've evolved I'm getting better at understanding when I need to step in and take control and support the players and be kind of, no, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. And then when I need to step back and let them at it.
Okay.
Because at different times, both of those things are appropriate. It's not an either or.
Okay, that's really interesting. I really like that. How have you upskilled as a coach? How do you continuously learn? What kind of sort of courses do you go on? You mentioned kind of books there, even podcasts. What do you use to upskill?
Various things. Books and podcasts, obviously. I find I end up I have stacks and stacks of books, be it memoirs, novels, whatever, or very heavy sports science books. The reality is my lifestyle at the minute, I tend not to get from start to finish in anyone. So podcasts are easier, because who isn't making podcasts these days, Orla? So podcasts are handy driving to and from training. Online courses, all of that. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of stuff you can sign up for. I'm in my second year of a professional doctorate in DCU.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, yeah. So that's a big chunk of upskilling and challenging. In elite performance and sport. So
okay,
that is. So it's good. It's great. There's a nice mix within the cohort in the group that's doing it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a challenge because it makes you interrogate everything you're doing.
Okay.
Why you're doing it and how you're doing it.
That's interesting because I've seen, I think, a couple of posts about that course, and the variety of people on the course is brilliant. But for you, have you looked at other sports much? And if so, what have you taken from the various sports?
I've looked at a few. I suppose over the last couple of years, I've worked with a couple of individual athletes from different sports for different particular reasons. Then in last year, I took over the under-21 or national development squad for Irish hockey, the women's hockey team. And then a couple of weeks ago, getting more involved with the senior team. So that was interesting. I'd say I played hockey for my transition year in secondary school, and that was about the height of it. So it's a team sport. You get the principles of team sport, but something totally new. Tournaments, very new. They play numerous games within a week. So it's not like a GAA calendar where you build up, you drop down, you build up, you drop down. It's tournament competition, which is different. So that was interesting, seeing a different team sport. And then I suppose you're always observing, aren't you? You're always observing different cultures and different sports. Because every sport has its own as its language or culture. So you sort of what works in there and would that work here? And because it doesn't always work elsewhere. And what are the common training principles or modalities that people use in different sports? So it's interesting. Speaking
of teams, you're involved with Coola. What was it like going into that team? A team that was successful and were going places, but to bring them over the line, what was that like being involved in that setup and that culture?
It was great. I mean, it was in one way a successful club is something kind of special in the GAA because the club is so important in the GAA. Coola, very tight knit club out in the south side of Dublin. A huge amount of energy around that hurling team. Very, very tight community. So there was a lovely feel. Most of the players were in the same school together. They were really, really close. So it was a privilege to be allowed into that space as an outsider, and enjoy that and enjoy the feel of it. It was again very satisfying because the guy that was there before me did a fabulous job and everything was improving. And I suppose when I arrived, you're just trying to, just trying to tweak small things. Like so much stuff was right, and it's only small little bits and pieces that you're trying to improve, or particular players that you're trying to improve, and maybe make a little bit faster, a little bit stronger. So often, I think when you go into those sort of things, you think you need to completely change everything or overhaul things. But from my experience, you don't really. And sometimes it's just the fact that you're a new voice. You bring a bit of energy. It's not that you're doing anything unbelievable that they've never seen before. They're probably doing all the same stuff with me.
Yeah.
Maybe just a fresh voice was good. But it was, to be honest, it was mostly Maddie and the hurling coaches. I mean, they play hurling, so
yeah. What's it like going into a male-dominated team and sport? I'm not just even speaking about Coola here. You can draw on other teams, and being a female coach, what's that like going into that environment for the first time?
The first time, I think one thing I learned early on was that you have to do it your own way. So what's the stereotypical S&C coach? I took over in Coola. The guy that I took over from was, I don't know, 6'5" or something. An absolute gent, like massive guy, towering over me, big booming voice. So he had such a huge presence, right?
Yeah.
So he could barely raise his voice, and you'd hear him a mile down the road. So he had his style of doing things, and I remember kind of learning early on, and that is a good example. Like, I was never going to be able to do it like him. I was like, I don't shout and roar really unless I have to. Or I
you did it me now.
I approached them. I did, yeah. Well, that's you won't
I
go
needed it.
That was. Yeah. But you know what I mean? That you have to figure out how to do it your own way, and you can't presume that just because this role is usually done by fellas, that you have to do it in that sort of a manner, or that you have to try and fit in. Your job is to get the best out of people, and your job is to make people better athletes. And however you can do that, do it. And if that is in inverted commas, softer approach, now whatever softer means, I don't know. I don't think I'm soft in any way, shape, or form, but I don't how would you say, like, overpower, as I say, like shout and roar people. I think just an open, honest, eyeball to eyeball conversation is the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
And that's so. Have I been aware of it? Sometimes you are. Has it had any impact on my career? I don't think so. I think once you're clear about why you do what you do, and you're clear and confident in how you approach your job, then I think it's okay.
Brilliant. When you go into let's say a GA team now for this conversation, but when there's a panel of 35 players, say, and you've got 15 players playing on the day with 5 subs, and you've got probably, when you've got 35, if you're playing a 15-on-15 game, you have 5 subs there. How do you keep numbers 27 to 35 motivated when they're putting in the same commitment, the same level of training, the same sacrifice as the starting 15?
That's a brilliant question, Orla. And that is one of the biggest challenges in team sport, and especially as you go up the levels, because the reality is, if you're running an intercounty team, most teams now have their first team, and a lot of them have this development squad type structure running as well. And trying to manage all those people is really difficult. And the reality is, when you get to that level, it's hard. And there is no way around the fact that you need 30 plus in your training squad to have quality training. You're always going to have 1 or 2 people who are stepping out of things, etc. So you need, if you're playing in-house games, you need 30 plus, but you can't take 30 plus on the bus to Crow Park, and even those who are on the bus to Crow Park can't all play.
Yeah.
So there is no way around that other than, from a physical point of view, trying to keep people you call top up or catch up running. So if you don't play at the weekend, you still go and you do X amount of physical work so that you maintain the same level as those who played. Because let's say I'm number, 20, 22, and I didn't get any game time at the weekend, and then the next day I didn't get any game time again, and the person who I'm competing with for a place has got 2 quality games under their belt. So their fitness is on the up. So for me, my job is to keep everybody ready, so that person who played those 2 games, let's say they get injured, all of a sudden number 22 has to come in and replace them.
Yeah.
But if they've so they're already on the back foot because there's obviously a reason why they're not starting.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I've let their fitness drop down, they're even worse, But the problem is when you say to somebody, okay, you didn't get played in that championship match and they're disappointed, and now you've got to come and do extra running with me. It feels like they're getting a double whammy.
Yeah.
Am I being punished here, or what's the story? So the motivation is important. And I think it's, again, based on that clarity, saying, look, this is reality. Girls, boys, whoever they are, this is reality. So do you want to fall further behind, or do you want me to help you stay on top of the fitness? So when and if you do get the call, you can do an unbelievable job for those 15 minutes. Or if somebody gets injured on the Friday night before a game and you get called, right, you're in on Sunday, you need to be just as fit to make your point. So there's kind of no way around it.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because I actually asked a couple of people for questions, and you know who it is, but somebody said that you were the difference maker for them. They weren't in the plans in 2017, and a year later they were because of you. I'm always fascinated by, how do you balance that individual improvement in a squad of 35 where, for example, with myself, if you're trying to specifically improve something with me, how do you balance that around the 34 other players that you need to give attention to?
Yeah, again, this is the challenge with team sports, and coaches, managers will often ask you, I want individualized programs. I say, okay, and I want to, we've got to individualize now. It can't be a one size fits all. And I'm like, 100% agree. Okay, so what does that mean in reality? So you do your battery of testing and you get some information. Generally speaking, with team sport players, they kind of need to be good at everything. So you need to have good fitness, you need to have good agility, good speed, good strength. So you're never going to be, you just have to be pretty good at all the capacities, a good, well-rounded athlete. What you will find is some people will naturally, their super strength will be their speed. Maybe they're not that great at endurance, so they've got to stay on top of that. Now, so that's all fine, a textbook. And of course, if I had 5 individual sessions a week with all these 35 players, of course you could do individual programs. But again, go back to reality and go back to logistics. You've 35 players, you have 3 pitch sessions, and you've 1 gym session. And there's one of me and there's 35 of them. So how in God's name do you do all those individual programs? The reality is you don't. The reality is you try and pick a time where you get to, and preseason is a good place for this, because I get a bit more time in preseason. But like if I asked a manager saying, okay, can I take 45 minutes of this 90-minute session, and I want this group over here doing this, and this group over here doing this, and this group over, they'd say, no, we've got to play the game. You told me to get them faster, and they need all this technique work. Well, no, we've got a game on Sunday. They've got to play football, or they've got to play hurling. So it doesn't work. So I think 2 things. Preseason, when you have more time, and the longer you're with people, the better you know them, the more you can make those judgments. So if you're with a team a couple of years and you know a player really well, coming into preseason, you kind of know, okay, this is where you are in your trajectory, and you make those changes straight away. And then outside that, you're looking for opportunities within the season to say, okay, can I take on a Tuesday night, can I take these 6 players, because speed is there, or agility is their limiting factor.
Yeah.
So I'm either going to meet them early, or I'm going to keep them back afterwards and even do 10 or 15 minutes. And that happens on a Tuesday. And on a Thursday or a Friday, the ones that really need endurance, I say, okay, can I meet them, keep them for an extra 15 minutes after the session to add on a bit. But that's reality is that's about as good as you're going to get, in my opinion, based on reality of what actually happens. But I do think that where we potentially miss a trick in the GAA, or where we can improve, is our off season and our pre-season. And not that, I'm all for players having a balance and letting them off and doing their own thing, all for it. But it's that, and because the season's now getting more condensed, the inter-county season. So once you're up and going and you're in the league, you need to be kind of pretty much fit
Yeah.
You know, you can't have this massive issue that you need to deal with. So I suppose supporting players when we're not in season and we're not playing games to stay on top of whatever they need to do, or give them a bit of guidance. You tell me you really want to get better your endurance. Well, you know, the 2 months before you come back to us, if you tried this, I'm not going to police you. I'm not going to force you to do it, because we have to give them some freedom and some autonomy, you know, that. But maybe I think there's something we can do a little bit better on that front.
So would you nearly make the argument that should we train, in GAA terms, should we train more in the pre-season and we're training too much mid-season because you don't necessarily have the time, or even like if you're trying to play a match on Sunday, you can't be working on some of the stuff that you've just mentioned. It's more beneficial in the off-season. What do you think of that?
Well, I think especially with the condensed season, and if we're trying to, in some ways, you've everyone saying the demands on inter-county players are too much, you know. So of course you could train 7 days a week in the middle of the league, but we're not going to, you know, and that's not the vision for the GAA. So when league and championship starts, the game should be front and center. Now, of course, you can manipulate training, and of course you can incorporate some stuff, absolutely. But I think that from an athlete development or an S&C point of view, if we can get players to arrive at that sort of when the collective season starts, in generally speaking, better condition, there isn't as much pressure later on. And I think we have to know what that looks like. I think that doesn't mean you're kind of whipping guys every week and saying, okay, we're in the gym 3 sessions a week, 3 months before we go back collective training. They'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But if you have your culture and your motivation right, and you're saying, okay, work on this in your own time, they're competent in the gym, they're competent trainers, they're educated, that's just giving them a bit of support. Most people are doing stuff anyway. If you're an inter-county player, you're keeping yourself fit. But it's just usually season ends, everyone goes their separate ways, people go on holidays. Sometimes the S&C coaches change, so there's no transfer of knowledge into the next season. So I think we can just do, and I think players would appreciate it. Then you arrive back at collective training and you can really focus on the game rather than worrying about running up and down from the blue cone to the red cone, you know.
Mm-hmm. When you do structure a session, do you focus more, and I'm interested, it'll obviously change your pre-season and in-season, but do you focus more on your strengths, or the team's strengths, or the team's weaknesses?
It depends on how big the weaknesses are. Okay. So I suppose the way I try and visualize it or explain it to athletes of any, and this applies to a team as well. So, you know, like a hot air balloon. Yeah. So, and you pull the thing, and the
flame
heat goes up and goes in. The flame goes up. Yeah. So how I visualize it is that balloon that carries the basket is your strengths. That's what you're good at. That's why you're an inter-county player, and you've got to keep heating that, keep that going to carry you up, right? And then, you know, the things that hang off the baskets, the weights, they're your limiting factors. So everybody has some of them. So as a coach, you're trying to figure out, okay, what are the strengths? And we feed that, because that's why we're good. We keep feeding that. And then all these little weights in the baskets that's hanging on the basket, you're saying, well, what is the biggest one? If I could cut one of those, that would make the biggest impact and that balloon would fly even higher, what would it be? And then trying to balance that the whole time. So not trying to cut every single rope. Just pick what's the heaviest weight that's holding this balloon down, and make that my priority with the team or with an athlete. But always keep heating the big balloon.
Mm-hmm. I really like that analogy. Out of interest, when you're talking to a player specifically and you're giving feedback, is there any particular structure or technique you use in giving feedback? I know some coaches have a particular way that they like to speak to players.
I wouldn't have a structure. I think for me, honesty is the most important thing. And it is the thing that you asked me earlier on about how I've evolved. Trying to be as honest as possible. I definitely found sometimes conversations uncomfortable before. Not wanting to tell a player you're not fast enough, or you're not good enough, or having those, or you're not really putting it in, you're kind of a bit lazy. using kind of maybe words I wouldn't use with players, you know, accusatory language, but finding a way to be honest and finding a way to build that trust with, like, if it's my job to get you fit and I have information that I'm not telling you, well, then I'm not doing a good job. Or if I have things that if I'm not being honest with you, well, then what's the point in this relationship? Like, what is the point if I'm withholding information that could make you better? So I've definitely gotten better at building those relationships to have an honest conversation. And I think what I've learned, if players don't feel like you're judging them or they don't feel threatened, then I think you get more value out of it. So having that relationship that they know. So if I'm talking to you about your physical fitness, that has nothing got to do with what I think of you as a person or who you are as a person. Like, that is just, well, here's the black and white thing. You can either run that fast or you can't. Mm-hmm. You're still a great person, but I'm telling you, you don't run fast enough for what you're trying to do on the pitch. Yeah. So making it very objective, I think, is important.
Okay, it's interesting. Specifically for S&C, this is very specific here, but someone asked me to ask you about this, but they wanted to know, you mentioned previously about going to a golf coaching conference, and they were talking about working oblique muscles for swing. How has this impacted your S&C approach for hurling teams?
Okay.
Sorry, that's very specific, this question.
Very, very specific. I suppose you're talking about rotational power there, rotational strength. And I mentioned hockey as well. So between hockey and hurling, it's basically all the principles of how to create rotational power. Now, what I've tried to do, and the biggest thing I see, so with hurlers, they're getting that movement the whole time, right? Yeah. They're getting that rotation. But where I think we can make a bit of progress, or I've seen it in both rotation sports, is more the kinetic chain. So in golf, your feet are planted on the ground, and it's how the power transfers up through knees, hips, shoulders, out into the hands, out into the club head, which results in club head speed. But that's a very controlled movement. Your feet are planted on the ground. It's very controlled. Mm-hmm. So they have a particular way of producing power. Now, my question is, and what I'm always thinking about is, in all the variety of positions of a hurler on the run, front foot, back foot, how do you use that kinetic chain? How do you use your hips especially to create more power, more force to get out through the arms and into the hurl? Same thing with hockey. So it's, in many ways, there's plenty of rotational power exercise, rotational strength exercise in the gym, but it's nearly a skill. It's not nearly a skill, it is a skill. It is a skill to figure out how you use your whole body to create that power. Okay.
You're back involved with the Dublin Senior Ladies team. What's your role with that squad at the moment?
I suppose the role is sort of overseeing all the athletic development.
And what's it like going back into that team where previously you were a player, and there's obviously still, I don't know how many, but there's still girls there that you would have been teammates with?
It's great. It's great. There's a few of them all right. Sinead Ahern, Lindsay. There's a few. Carla for a little while. Carla's changed a lot. So when I was playing my last couple of years, Carla was the young pup on the team. So she's changed a lot now in terms of her leadership.
Yeah.
It's very good. I don't think I could have been involved in the team previously from a coaching point of view.
Yeah.
Just because not enough time had passed, and I'm opinionated. So I think for me, even trying to coach people you would have played with, I would have found that difficult, because you have people you'd be better friends with and all of that. I don't think I could have been objective.
Yeah.
So I find now, even though I know, like, I've known Sinead 20 years now, but I can be a lot more objective just because more time has passed.
Okay.
So I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed being around the group. I would have had a lot of respect for the group over the last number of years, not only their achievements, but just how they carry themselves. I think all that stuff is really important. So I'm enjoying it. And I suppose I'm again really privileged to be back within the circle.
one of your former teammates, Denise Manson, is now involved in the minor team. Are you thinking maybe a link up at some stage, getting back together with part of management?
You never know. You never know. We both have to earn our stripes first. So,
yeah, that's fair enough. Tactically, do you think there's anything that, like, the game has obviously evolved a lot since you played, but do you think there's any particular tactical play or anything that would suit the game that we're waiting to see? Like, the men's game has evolved a lot. I think the ladies' game is going to evolve, and I'm looking to see what is that next evolution.
Another good question. How is it going to evolve? I think the fact that the standard, and it's a given over the last couple of years, like the standard of physical conditioning has improved. So the game is faster. People are running faster. Agility has improved. I think for me, the skill set, the left and right feet, I think the more that's brought in, you will see more expansive football being played. You'll see more switches of play, because people won't just look up and look to the right foot. They'll look up and they'll see left and right a bit more. So I think tactical transition play, forward play will be more unpredictable, perhaps. I think we'll see growth in that area. I also think we'll see more kicking. We'll see more kicking from distance as just players, both technically and physically, improve. That should start coming to the fore now.
Okay, very good. For all the players you've coached, played with, played against, could you break down the most common characteristics of the most successful and most driven players you've seen?
Okay, that is a tough question. Right. The most common characteristics of the most successful players.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, attention to detail is one. Knowing specifically how and why they want to get better, and being uncompromising in that. No, this has to be better. No, this has to be better. You mentioned Denise. I remember myself and Denise having a meeting with Liam Moggan, who was involved in the team. I think it was 2010, and we were given out about something, basically. And then during the meeting, we questioned. I think Denise questioned, are we just being? She said, "Am I just being moany here? Am I just nitpicking?" And he said, his answer was very interesting. And I remembered it. He said, no, and not at all, Denise. Only dead fish go with the flow. And that stuck with me. And he said, you need somebody who will ruffle feathers, who will challenge, who will keep everybody on their toes. That's really important. And that stuck. That's probably, I don't know, what is it, over 10 years ago. But that definitely stuck with me. So sometimes that person who challenges all the time, who teams can be like, oh my God, would you ever give over? You need that. You need that piece. So you have that type of uncompromising character. I guess you also have the other character who that piece of, and someone can have both these characteristics, but that bit of making it easy for people around them to be really good. So it's not, so they're so conscious of themselves within the group. They're always looking left and right, thinking, what do they need? How do we work together? They're collaborators. They inspire people around them. I think that's too, for team sports. Like, team sports are difficult because yes, you've got to look after yourself, but you've got to be so cognizant of the group. And some people are very suited to team sport. So those two things. And the other one is, and athletes talk about this all the time, is the what would you call it? I'm trying to use a word that isn't resilience. Now I've used resilience, but the thick skin. You're not going to win every game. You're going to get a good few punches in the nose. You're going to trip up a few times. How tough are you? Because at high level sport, it is definitely not easy. Do you get a niggly injury? Do you lose? Do you miss a penalty? Do you make an absolute howler of an error that costs the game? Is it just a bloody hard in your lifestyle? Yeah. You're working a part-time job, you're trying to get to training, or you're a shift worker. Noel Healy, being a doctor, working shift work all hours. Tyrone Colleen at the minute, radiologist, working mad hours, trying to be elite footballer. it's hard. So how can you take all that? Can you take all of that stuff and keep going and keep enjoying it at the same time? It doesn't burn you out.
How do you measure success? And for you, really, what would be your definition of success?
Well, I suppose the definition of success is whatever you want it to be. So you have to know where you're going. So if you're number 27 or if you're on the development squad, your short-term success is be a starting player or impact the team or get on the senior team. Or so we can all say, oh, we want to win All Ireland, we want to win a World Cup, we want to win an Olympic medal, whatever it is. Of course, that's the big outcome. But again, elite sport, if that's your only measure of success, then it's very, very, very narrow, and you may never ever get that. So I think, and this is the thing about elite sport that is sometimes the most challenging for athletes, because you could have an unbelievably successful career and never win the big prize, and yet you're always striving for it. So in some point, if you win the All Ireland, you want to win 2, you win 3, you want to win 4, then you want to go for 5 in a row. So is anything ever good enough? So you've got to be comfortable with the consistent striving for something better, but also have some sort of contentment in, I do it because I enjoy the day-to-day process. Once again, I'm absolutely not answering your question. I don't think I am at all.
You just have to come back on again, Cliodhna.
Yeah. So there's 2 parts. Knowing everybody wants to win whatever the big prize is. So that's an easy answer. Success is an All Ireland final, grand. Yeah, okay. That's simplified it. But when you break it down to, as an athlete development coach, is my only marker of success if this team wins an All Ireland final? Could I do an amazing job and they still lose? Is that possible? Under who judges that? So I have to always give myself evidence of, am I making these people better regardless of the sport? Are we going in the right direction? Am I doing all the little things that are under my control to do to make these better? Because I can't control everything. I'm one person in a backroom team of a team sport with other oppositions who want to beat us. So, I'm not going to win every day and every game.
That makes sense. We're going to fly through the sidelines, Evan, because I know you have to go. It's the same 7 questions for every single guest. Question 1, what is your favourite quote?
My favourite quote, and I won't get it right, but it's, oh my God, blank. Mary Oliver is the name of the poet. And it's something along the lines of, when my life is over, I want to look back and say that I was married to amazement. That's that one. Nothing to do with sport.
Yeah, that's different. I've never had that one. I actually really like that. Question 2, what's the best sporting event you've been to? And you can pick one as a fan and as a player.
I think you cannot beat a kind of stadium rocking game of hurling in Croke Park. Can't beat it. I've been to a few.
Brilliant. Question 3, what's been the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
I'm not going to give you a specific one, but I'm going to give you uncertainty. So uncertainty in, as I said, I didn't plan to be a sports scientist or a coach. So uncertainty into, God, am I doing the right thing? There aren't many jobs in this. How do you make a career out of it? So all of that stuff of, it's not as easy as, I want to be an accountant and now I'm an accountant. All of that was very challenging. How did I get over it? I kind of just put the blinkers on and ploughed on, really, and said it'll all work out in the end.
Brilliant. Kind of on the flip side then, what's been your biggest achievement on or off the pitch?
Don't know. Biggest achievement on, I think small. This is a everyone roll their eyes at this answer, but like smaller improvements with specific players, over helping a player really overcome an obstacle, someone who's really unfit, and we put in a load of work and all of a sudden they're fit and they're on the starting team. Those sort of ones are the individual ones I take most satisfaction from those.
Okay, interesting. Looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Lighten up.
Very good. Who would be your dream dinner guest and why? And you can open up the table to a few people if you want.
Dream dinner guest and why? Kate Blanchett.
Very good. The final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
Mastering time management.
Brilliant. Cliodhna, I better let you go because you have to run to something else. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. The very best of luck with all your teams this year, and thanks again.
Thanks, Orla. Pleasure. Thank you.
A massive thank you to Cliodhna for joining me on the podcast today. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and personally I took a lot away from it. If you know of any coaches that should feature on the podcast, be sure to send me an email at thesidelinelive@gmail.com. If you are enjoying the series, I'd really appreciate if you leave a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as it does help the show grow. A massive thank you to Chin Up Goggles for sponsoring the series, and as always, thank you for listening.